Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. And now let's join today's host, Rick Mann.
In our postmodern lives, it's a sign of the times. I know all of us have felt it at some point or another. For some, it's a journey to find something that will give them inner strength to cope with life. For others, it's a thirst to find harmony in a chaotic world. And for many, it's a quest for a connection with the unseen, with that which is greater than ourselves. Or simply, it's a desire to find the basic answers to the basic questions of life. Who am I and why am I here? Hi, I'm Rick Mann, host of this week's Hope on Fire. And today, we're talking about the search for spirituality. We're here discussing that emptiness that each of us has and that void that we're all trying to fill. Is it real or imaginary? What can I do? What can we do to fill that void? And how can we help others searching for the same answers? Joining me today to help us with that spiritual search are Pastor Bill Crofton. You are the youth and young adult leader for the Florida Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. Next to him is Adam Heck, a high school teacher at Forest Lake Academy and a young adult leader here at the Forest Lake Church near Orlando, Florida. And finally, Chris Lang, my Hope on Fire co-host. Gentlemen.
Hey, Rick.
Hey.
Good to see you today.
Thanks for joining us. I think I'm just going to throw out this first question and just get the discussion started. Do you think there is an inherent need to fill a void in our lives, or is that just something, we make up? Bill, what do you think?
Most definitely. And, what kind of triggered this conversation between you and I is one morning about 3 months ago, I was reading the Orlando Sentinel, and they had put an article in there, and they said that not in the last 100 years had they seen such a heightened desire among college students, and they interviewed some on University of Central Florida, to search for spirituality, to find a deeper meaning of why we're here on this earth and what is life all about. So they have seen a rise in that search on secular campuses. And so, yes, I think there is an inherent need to fill that void. If you're looking at it from a biblical perspective, we're told in Ecclesiastes, 3rd chapter, around the 7th verse, that God has actually put eternity in our hearts. You can take that to mean that there is a seed of faith there. There is something He's placed in there right from the beginning as we were created.
Right.
And we're searching to fill that.
What do you think, Adam? I mean, if you had to define this search for spirituality, what do you think that might look like, or how would you define that?
The search for spirituality.
I mean, we're talking about this emptiness inside. Is that a good way of explaining it, maybe, or is there a better way we could maybe put a different spin on it or define it a little bit differently?
Well, I can only speak about what's happened in my life, and some. I guess I could talk about a little bit my kids too.
You don't have children, Adam? Is it
your students, right?
I have 150 of them at the Forest Lake Academy.
Wow, you're a busy guy.
Yes.
So you're a teacher, and you've had conversations with.
Well, we've had a number of conversations. I mean, I would spend the class time. We always had to have a worship in the beginnings, and during the class time, a lot of those will spin off into discussions, and most of those discussions center around a search for spirituality. Because every one of my students, not all of them are vocal about it, but you can see in their hearts that they're listening, and they are wanting to find that experience with God because they see and hear it in others, and they themselves want to experience that as well. And so in their hearts, they are searching.
What do you think they're searching for?
I think they're searching for a relationship. I think they're searching for a relationship with something that's greater than themselves.
Okay.
And a lot of them, as I said, don't know how to necessarily verbalize that.
Right.
But you can just see it in their hearts that that's what they're looking for.
We're talking about the evidences now, I guess. Bill, you mentioned that article talking about how the young adults in the last 100 years, you're talking about your students or high school students. What other evidences do we see that there is this need? We're not just talking about young adults here. We're talking about this isn't anything new, right, Bill?
No, it's not new at all. People have searched since the dawn of time. That quote you were talking about, I said I would bring, is from C.S. Lewis, and he talks about it as an inconsolable longingness. Almost inexplicable, but there is something within each of us that we want to fill, this connection. We're trying to connect. And he goes on to say we're trying to connect with the one who created us. But it's in all of us, and we're trying to fill it in some ways. And we've been on this search.
Well, and there's no question, Rick, that you just look at the number of world religions and the ways that they rise and fall and proliferate there's never been more world religions than there are now, and they're from Hinduism to Buddhism to what 1,400 Christian denominations, all looking for a core purpose of identity and a future and someone greater than themselves, as you said, they can have a relationship with.
Right. It's interesting. There was a Newsweek poll several years ago, and they asked 1,000 Americans. And one of the first questions they asked, how important is spirituality in your daily life? Okay, that's just a general question, not to just Christians, but to anybody they could talk to. The age group, 18 to 39, young adults, very important or somewhat important, which are the top two categories. 76% said it was very important or somewhat important. This vague idea of spirituality, 76% of young adults. I mean, that's 3 out of 4. I mean, that's just a huge number. And the thing that strikes me, I guess, is, with all the world religions that are out there, with all of the secularism that's out there, young adults, people in general still have a need for spirituality. Science hasn't given them anything. Other things to fill that need, it's still there no matter what. Was that right, Bill?
And what's interesting is that article in the Sentinel also brought out, said, it was quite surprising to the person who wrote it, but he said what makes it very important is there's a lot of things you can fill that void with that are not necessarily going to be productive or they're going to lead you to a fulfillment. Yeah. And he says it's kind of scary. And he said what's interesting also, and I think you had a book that we talked about the other day, traditional churches are not filling that void.
Right.
And young people are finding spirituality in other ways.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the big things I think, or one of the big temptations that is out there is to try to fill that void with yourself. And to try to fill that void by coming into yourself and trying to make yourself feel better.
Right.
And all that does, in my experience, is seen, it just makes you go into a deeper and deeper pit.
Well, before we start talking about the ways that we attempt to do that, let me just ask one more basic question. Why did God make us this way, Bill? I mean, it's like, is this something that was on purpose? Was this something that was intentional? Is this just a byproduct of being separated from something greater than us? I mean, why did God, make us this way?
I personally believe because, number one, God made us in His image. He wants us to have a choice. We're made for free will. We have a choice to decide whether we want that relationship or not, and that's the way He wanted it. And when you look at the Scripture, how He made us in His image, and put all that together, you seem to come away with the fact that He wants us to search for it.
Right.
It's not like, it's there. There's evidences that He's there, but He wants us to search for it, and that's where faith kicks in. And to me, that's just the way, I like to use the expression in today's term, that's just the way we're hardwired. We're hardwired to know God.
Right.
We just got to get on that journey.
I love that about God. He says, come, let us reason together.
Right.
Though your sins be as scarlet, they'll be as white as snow. But that reasoning part, that intelligence, God made us as a thinking individual. And to me, not just the intelligence He created in us, but also the need for community. When He said, let us make man in our image, we think so much about physical characteristics.
Right.
But God Himself is relational, and He can't be love unless He has someone to be in community with.
So did he make us for that search? Did He create that inside of us to have that search going?
Well, it's almost like He has that expectation that that's what's required of us almost. I mean, I guess if you think about it, it's like, do I appreciate something if it's just given to me or if I work for it? I mean, which one do I take more personally? Which one do I take more seriously? Something that's just given, or something that I earn or look for myself?
Or forced upon you, even.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. It gets back to Bill's point about He gave us that free will. Well, let's talk about a few minutes before the break here. What are some of the ways that we maybe incorrectly try to fill that void? And I say we. I'm not just talking about us Christians, but society in general. You mentioned selfishness, basically ourselves, right, Adam?
Well, that's the one danger that I see I see most prevalent. You look, a lot of religions are trying to find your center within yourself, trying to find your what do you say, your chi. I don't know the technical terms, but a lot of religions make you look to yourself to find fulfillment, and it doesn't work. Just to say it plainly, it just does not work to look into yourself to find fulfillment.
Well, there are also those religions who believe in a deity that is greater than themselves, but it's not a relational kind of a God. And so
Right.
you are sort of behavioral in your orientation to create that next level of becoming, whatever that best part of, becoming the best you can be, kind of a mantra, like a behavior modification
Right.
mantra that you hear,
But-
sometimes with a religious overtone.
But but even the people that aren't religious. I mean, I'm not
Right.
just talking about the Buddhists out
Yeah.
there or the Hindus out there or whatever. I'm talking about the people who are secular.
Right.
I mean, they have this need. They realize it. Maybe they can't put their finger on it. They can't quite define it. So they're attempting to try to fill it with anything that they can grasp. Maybe because they have no traditional religious background. What are some other ways that
Well,
people are trying to fill?
think about it. Some people fill it with work.
Okay.
Some people fill it with relationships, one after the other. Some people fill it with money, we're a materialistic society. I mean, there's all kinds of superficial ways to try to fill it, and we see
Right.
people every day that do. And
even doing church.
yeah,
You brought that up when we were talking the other night, Bill, in preparation for the program, that even Christians sometimes use the trappings of religion to somehow feel better about themselves, to feel a peace or a comfort about my identity. Really, that spirituality ultimately is, what is my purpose for being here?
Yeah.
Why am I here?
and I've talked to young people, and I know I've been there before too. That have said, if I could find that job, or if I could just go to that school, or if I could get that kind of a mate in life, I'll have it. And they get the job, they get the mate, they go to the school, they have the bank
still
account,
empty.
and it's still not there.
And look
Wow.
at Adam,
It's
he's
still not
achieved
there.
it all. And, where are you, Adam?
I'm here at Hope on Fire. And,
That's right.
that's
We're praying for you.
thank you, appreciate that.
Bill, let me ask you another question then. We talked about all these different ways that they try to fill it. Why do they take that road to fulfillment? I mean,
Well, I think because it's easier. I think because it feels good sometimes too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. Let's be honest. We've done a lot of things that felt good immediately, immediate gratification, and that's kind of the culture we're in too. Quick religion, quick food.
Well, I read a study just last week in Yahoo News that said that people are actually moving at a 30% faster pace than they were
remember you
10
saying
years
that.
ago.
Wow.
They literally measured the speed at which people walk in big cities and scientifically proved that people are so driven by productivity measures or whatever society tells us we have to be, that we've got to move faster, and there's this sense that I've got to move faster to accomplish whatever that success means.
And I was reading Newsweek not long ago, and they said they were asking questions about this pace and the society and the culture we're in, and all the technology that's been developed. And they were just asking questions like, "What's the #1 selling shampoo out there?" And the answer, of course, was Pert, because you can shampoo and condition at the same time.
two things at once.
You can get through
Save
it.
time.
Multitasking.
Right.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
where we are. But we go back to it, and you see these people, and you can read about their lives. They've had everything.
Yeah.
They've had the bank account, everything, and some of them end up committing suicide.
Yeah.
Some of them checked
Yeah.
out. So it's not filled.
The interesting thing is that's nothing new. I mean, King Solomon had the same problem, right? I mean,
Yes, he did.
after his life, he tried to fill it with so many different things. What did he say at the end? He
It's
said,
everything is meaningless.
everything is meaningless. Yep.
I like the way the Message puts it. He says it's all spit in the wind.
That's a awesome way of putting it. I love the Message Bible. That's great. When we come back from the break, we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting poll question, and I think it will lead us into the next part of this show. Thanks for watching. This is Hope on Fire. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hope on Fire. This week we are talking about the search for spirituality. Joining me, Pastor Bill, Adam Heck, and of course, Chris Lang, my co-host. Before the break, I alluded to this poll question, and it's a loaded question, Bill, and it's going to be coming right at you right after I read it. In which instance do you feel most connected with God or the divine? Now, this is again that Newsweek poll that we mentioned at the first half of the show. In which instance do you feel most connected? When praying or meditating, 40%. When in nature, 21%, for a total of 61%. Third, at 21%, is in a house of worship, meaning going to church. So here's my question, Bill. Why are Christian young people struggling with this search for spirituality, even if they've been raised in the church all of their lives?
I don't think it's an easy question, but I appreciate you asking it because I think it's critical. And I think one of the reasons is that the church that they're attending, for the most part, is their parents' church. It's fashioned that way. The methodology is their parents. The style is their parents. And too many times, traditional churches will not allow those young people to come to the table with food that they want to bring. meaning styles that they would like to search for God in. In other words, it's not a safe place for them to do it. And that's one of the reasons the article brought out we better be careful. If we do not adapt, if we do not listen to young people, they're going to start searching in places we may not want them to.
Right. And let's be careful. When we talk about adapting, we're not talking about changing truth as we know it in Scripture. We're talking about adapting cultural and relevant forms of expression, right?
Right.
I would even say, you know, I had a student pose this question to me one time. Not a question. She said to me, whether you know it or not, people are watching you. And I wonder if students, their struggle for spirituality is because they're not being given good examples from people above, older than them of what that is. You know, because they are watching us. Young people watch the young adults. They watch the older folks as well to find out, you know, how do they get to spirituality.
Well, you know, maybe that's, I guess the being a loaded question was maybe a little bit more edgy than I was trying to get at. Because what I think is that church ultimately needs to be a place where spirituality is taught, not necessarily maybe experienced or felt. But I guess that's probably one of been the biggest challenges in my life is that I haven't been taught or mentored how to be spiritual. Yes, I've gone to church all my life. I've been in church school all my life. And yes, we do Bible studies. But it really wasn't until I actually took a course in college on spiritual disciplines that I actually really started getting a glimpse into what it means to be spiritual.
I think there's two dynamics. One is the pace of life we're living. Bill, you brought up a good point. 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet. Even 10 years ago, it was such a rarity. And the speed of life is so fast now, and the way that young people and young adults and young families are being driven at a pace unprecedented. Secondly is the role models that we've lacked, the mentors. And the modeling of Christianity has been such that people have rejected it at the point of, we're playing church or we're doing church because the church is people. And when Jesus said in John 13, they will know you're my disciples not by the miracles you do, not by the way you quote Scripture, but what is Jesus saying to his disciples there? They'll know by the way you love one another. When there's unconditional acceptance in the body, the young adults can read right through people playing games.
Yeah. And forgive me, Rick, but I want to bring you back to that question, and I wanted to get you edgy, okay?
All right.
I don't want to leave this until we say something here. I looked at some research that was handed to me a month and a half ago from the North American Division. The research polled Adventist churches across North America. There are 1,000 Adventist churches across America that have no young people and no young adults in them.
Wow.
The average age for the North American Division Seventh-day Adventist is 58.
Wow.
That's alarming to me. And the conclusions they gave were a couple startling ones, but they said, number one, bring the kids to the table and listen to them. In other words, don't get upset if they bring a guitar to church. Don't get upset if they want to do a drama at church. Don't get upset if they want to raise their hands at church, because you just hit it. Love them. Embrace them. Let them find expression for their faith that it's comfortable for them.
We have this tendency to take our experience and say that is the height of what Christianity should be. And anybody who comes up after us can't take that to another level. And I think that's happened in a lot of our churches, that what has worked for the adults in the church, they're expecting that to be the same method that's going to work for the kids. And when it doesn't, one, they're not flexible enough to change, and two, they blame the kids because why aren't you measuring up to the standard that I've set?
Right.
And we've got to let the kids take it and grow with it.
When I think about spirituality, and this is kind of leads us into this next question of what's the best way to fill that need that we have, that hole in our lives, it's so personal. Spirituality is personal. And just like you said, Adam, just because I experience it one way doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else has to experience it that way. And also, it's a journey. It's one of those things where if you don't know how to do it, you're a newbie. When you sit down, it's like, what do I do? How do I study the Bible? How do I connect with God?
I'm glad you said that. Okay, I have 3 sons, and I'll never forget one. The middle son came home one day, and I was getting close to reaming him out because he was not in church. Okay, I wanted him to be in church. He was surfing, which I know many Adventists would not like that to happen on Sabbath. And not a contest or anything. And we had a discussion, but then he turned to me, and there was a tear in his eye. And he says, Dad, I wasn't just surfing. I was out there at 5 o'clock in the morning. Dolphins were around my board. A tear in his eye now. And he says, I was worshiping.
Wow.
That stretched me.
Way to go, Dad.
But I've listened and I've learned.
Yeah.
You're right.
The expression of spiritual things is not a one-size-fits-all, and yet it's a combination of experience, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You said, Paul stated that we shouldn't reject the gathering of believers, and yet there's a need for solitude too, and that takes discipline.
Yep.
We talked a little bit about the spiritual marathoner. You're not just going to go out and run the marathon. It takes practice and endurance and stamina development.
Well, let me go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just saying, you have to be willing at times, and maybe fail is not the right word, but you have to be willing to go through the times when you're not going to have these great experiences with God.
Right.
You know, because every good thing has to be developed, like you said with the marathon. Every good thing, if you're going to learn it, you're not going to learn it by just reading a book. You're not going to learn it by someone telling you. You've got to go out and learn and grow and fail through the process, and then eventually you reach that stage.
You know, maybe I should ask that question, and we didn't ask this question as we prepared for the show, but I'm going to throw it out. What does that search for spirituality actually look like if you're being good, if you're being successful?
For me personally, and maybe I shouldn't jump in before the pastor. I don't know. But,
he kind of had a blank look on his face, so I'm kind of glad you jumped in.
Now you got to repeat the question for me. What was the question? You distracted me.
No, I'm sorry.
What does it look like when you're successful in your spiritual
if you're
walk?
being successful in that search for spirituality, what does that look like?
I think if you can even say a successful way to do it, it's got to be just time spent. You know, with and I always harken back to the idea of that finding spirituality is finding that relationship with somebody and finding that relationship with God. Wow. You cannot have a relationship with God if you do not make the commitment to time with Him. And that time, you know, we're all very good at reading, and I think that, you know, we've learned how to read since we were old. How many of us have learned how to pray? How many of us have learned to stop and listen? And that's how we develop that relationship. That's where spirituality comes from.
And you know, one way it looks too, I think, and I appreciate what both of you said, and the other night too, about that personal relationship. It's very important to both of you. You made that real clear. In other words, the time spent, the discipline of doing it. But I think about Paul again, who could write this letter to the Philippian church, and the people who knew that he was thrown in jail, knew that he suffered the lash of the whip, knew that he went through a hard time there, and he can write back to them and say, you know, I give thanks to God in all circumstances. You know, I try to take everything that comes and just let the Lord have it and express my joy and happiness. So that's one way it looks. When you're going through a routine day, when you're going through a hard day, you still have this peace, like the Bible says, that it defies your understanding of it, but yet it just settles in on you.
Right.
Yeah, there's a comment from a book written by J.L. Tucker that says that basically, like Elisha, if we were confident in the divine presence, that's the spiritual connection with our Creator, that we would have our testimony and experience would be that of calm trust. That's the peace you're talking about. We don't rely on the big miracle, the huge Mount Carmel experience. There's a peace that passes understanding, and it must be experienced. But putting yourself, now, this is one of the, and I'll confess, when you put yourself in that place where you say, God, I'm totally surrendering, what kind of change? Might I be a different person if God takes hold of me and changes me? What will I look like then? Will I be a kook? So it's dangerous to go to God and say, change me.
Right. Yeah. Well, the thing is, what happens if for the person that goes to God and says, change me, and nothing happens? I mean, you know, we talk about this Mount, Carmel experience, or, I mean,
that's not going to happen.
Okay.
It's going to take time. Yeah. And it won't be drastic, but that's just not going to happen.
Every time I've gone to God and asked Him intentionally to change me, He shows me in my daily life, in a personalized way. He's never failed to show me that He heard my prayer, but it had to be intentional. Those are the times when I notice God.
Because He promised us, is when you search for me with all your heart, all your mind, with great intensity, you will find me.
And we tend to want that short-term answer. We want the instant gratification. Right. Matter say, change me now. And if you don't, well, you're not doing anything.
Right.
You know.
And I'll tell you what it looks like sometimes for me. And I told you guys this the other day. Sometimes I'm an early riser. I'll go out there in my driveway. I'll pick up that paper and I'll stop. And I'll look up in the heavens. Sometimes tears will run down my face because I'm just looking and visualizing God up there and thanking Him for giving me that hug. So it is that relationship. It is that intensity. And it should happen like Paul says. And this is a guy who wrote 13 out of the 27 books of the New Testament and thought you'd have an expert on it. And he says, I don't have it all together yet, but I'm still learning. Right. So it's a journey. But this is a guy who says, I do this every day. I do this every day.
In that journey, there are going to be times when we begin to lose faith. And I just love that text in Timothy that says that when we are faithless, God will remain faithful to us. You know, He wants that relationship more than we could ever imagine. And there will be those dry periods, but...
And those times when you can't even formalize a prayer, you can't even get the words out. And Romans says God takes your groans. He takes your groans and your sighs. and he shapes them into communication.
You know, that's
great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's just awesome. And guys, I'm really glad we ended with that question, because that's just a great way to kind of tie up the show and get us to where we need to be as we close out here. You know, in his song, More to This Life, Stephen Curtis Chapman sings, "But there's more to this life than living and dying, more than just trying to make it through the day, more than these eyes alone can see, and there's more than this life alone can be." All of us, no matter what our religious background, are wired for a desire to seek that which is not seen, that which is bigger than ourselves and outside of ourselves. But Psalms 46:10 simply says, "Be still and know that I am God." He is there, waiting for us to engage him, waiting for us to simply ask him to draw us into his presence. He's there to fill that God-sized hole that each of us has inside. He is what we should ultimately find at that end of our search for spirituality. You know, I want to thank our guests this week, Pastor Bill Crofton, Adam Heck, and my co-host, Chris Lang. Thanks a lot, guys. I really do appreciate it. Comments were awesome. Yeah.
A lot of fun.
If you want some more resources to guide you on your spiritual search, I would encourage you to visit us at our website, www.hopeonfire.org. There you'll find more resources about today's topic, as well as an archive of all of our previous shows. Thanks for watching.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860. Once again, that's Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860, or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.